structured data for SEO or during an SEO process. This is a tricky, let's say, type of task because, of course, we know what is the ideal on one hand, but then on the other hand, there are always limitations and restrictions with resources. So how do we prioritize? What do we focus on? And to talk about this in today's Learning SEO Accelerator Q&A session, I have invited someone who has tons of experience, who has his own tool too, that can help to even automate the implementation of structured data. Andrea Volpini, the co-founder and CEO/director of Wordlift. Hello, Andrea, how are you?
Hello, hi, I'm super good. Very excited to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Very, very excited to have you here too. So to start a little bit the conversation, let's say lay the foundation of our today's topic, explaining that structured data is pretty much markup that we can use to specify the meaning of the content of the pages in very basic in a very basic way, right? On one hand, we have, let's say, all the possibilities and the alternatives to specify the meaning of a lot, let's say, of different objects, properties, etc. We can find a lot of what is important and what is not in the schema website. On the other hand, and for SEO purposes, we have what Google supports from the structured data. That is not necessarily all of it, right? So Google, for some of the existing structured data, will allow us to specify it on our websites. And in some cases too, they will pretty much leverage that implementation, that specification, to enhance the results of our pages in search results. Now, this is something that Google doesn't guarantee to do. And in fact, now that I am just mentioning it, I believe that I am already clarifying one of the questions, one of the doubts regarding, oh, I have already followed, and this is a typical question, all of the specifications, and I am validating the implementation of structured data, and it's correctly implemented, but it's not the rich result or the search feature that is supposed to be triggered in search results by Google. It's not being triggered. Well, they don't guarantee it. They don't guarantee it, right? They can and they cannot do it. You might be doing an amazing work, excellent work, implementing structured data, but it's up to them to decide if it's actually something meaningful and relevant to show, to satisfy at the end of the day, the search needs of the users when going through that particular query or topics, right? But even with this, let's say, lack of confidence that Google will do it every single time, is always beneficial, right? So, Andrea, here it comes my first question. How do we prioritize? What are the steps that you tend to follow to ensure cost effectiveness, right? Like to cover the base, to do the right thing, to also try to avoid the typical errors, challenges, and issues that we find during this technical, because at the end of the day, it's a technical implementation that can be automated with a few tools, but to avoid these burdens, what would you say are the minimal viable steps for a good implementation?
So it's a super important topic because we have to start always right. So we want to look at the benefit first. And then we can kind of walk back and try to see, okay, in order to get this benefit, what is the minimum effort that we can bring in order to achieve it? So first and foremost, we need to understand the status quo. You know, is there already a CMS that is providing some markup? Yes or no? And second, what is the actual cost of the implementation? I mean, what it would take. Is it one page after the other? Is it a system? Is it a template? Do we have access to the template? So what is the cost of the implementation? I would start from looking at the benefit. So what can we achieve by implementing structured data on one end, and on the other side, you know, what is the expected cost of implementation? And we can, of course, get estimates, you know, on both sides. It's hard to kind of come up with a precise, you know, percentage of traffic increase. there are a few things that we learned along the way. We know that structured data can be beneficial on an explicit level, meaning if it triggers a results that is enriched, we do expect generally an enhanced click-through rate, and therefore we can expect an increase on the clicks. And then there is an implicit value of structured data. If the search engine is capable of understanding the topic that our page is representing, it might drive more qualified traffic. This doesn't mean that it drives more traffic, but it means that it might drive more qualified traffic, which should be measurable in terms of increase on the conversion rate or increase on, the quality of the leads that we're generating. So in terms of benefit, we typically look at either an explicit value, which is where I would recommend to start. So is there an option for us to get high quality visibility on SERP by adding features that would trigger a rich results? Basic example would be, I don't know, review, highly debated. Basic example would be, I don't know, return policies or, free shipping terms for products. So things that are immediately visible to the searcher and can drive a decision. A free shipping drives a decision on a SERP, because if we're looking at two identical products and one is featuring free shipping, for example, and another one is featuring anything, it's just empty, doesn't say anything. Maybe it has free shipping, but it doesn't appear on SERP. Well, the consumer most probably will click on the free shipping one. So there are things that are very obvious. Things like, I don't know, aggregated reviews, overly abused in most cases, but still they can drive click-through rate. Other aspects are more subtle. We can, for example, expect that by adding the undocumented, according to Google, service markup, we can actually get better quality of search from local queries. Crazy, but I've been tested that so many times that I'm pretty confident that if there is a service that has been offered in a specific geographical area and we apply service markup, I'm pretty confident that we can bring a lift. How big is the lift? Well, it depends on the competitiveness of the SERP. But roughly, everything that makes sense for us, it will go between 4% to 8%. This is what we can expect when we are working on implicit features like, service markup to advertise a service in a specific area. There are things subtle, but still very relevant, such as adding a link for a local business to the CID on Google Maps. CID is the identifier of the activity on Google Maps. And even though it might sound obvious, but it isn't obvious for Google Scroller to understand that that web page is linked to an existing, business profile on Maps. We can make this relationship explicit by using, the CID into the attributes of the local business. These are very subtle details, but they can be measurable.
I think that you have mentioned at least three things that I would like to really, really highlight right now when going through this process. The first one is the abuse that many of these structured data can end up having in order to maximize the click-through rate, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to profit the most out of it, right? And after a while, Google says, okay, this has become too spammy, the FAQ. Structured data, for example, we are going to stop supporting this because SERPs are not necessarily clean. The FAQs are not really that useful because when everybody's doing it and it's quite repetitive, et cetera, it doesn't add value. And then they stop supporting it. And I have seen many SEOs saying, oh my God, and with all of the work that we have gone through to do this, and then Google stops supporting it. What a nightmare. And I agree that it's always a disappointing thing when this happens, but I come back then to the other point that you mentioned regarding the ROI, the cost effectiveness of this. And as with any other SEO implementation, we should prioritize this based on impact and effort. If we are working on a CMS or a platform or have the resources to hire and install a tool like yours, Andrea, for example, others that exist in the market that will pretty much accelerate and facilitate the implementation. So we have it in a few hours or a few days rather than months of the developer's work, then it actually makes sense and is a good, let's say, bet to do. And if it is not guaranteed that we will get value with a huge impact right away, right? Because cost hasn't been very high. But the problem is when we push, just because is a guideline that is part of...
no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense at all. Another point that you highlighted that I believe that is very, very, very important to mention too is how certain type of configurations or properties can end up having more impact, even if not obvious or the more common in certain type of scenarios, right? Especially when you are in a sector that is not necessarily as competitive for certain type of use cases. And here I want to mention something that a lot of tools or plugins or extensions that will end up automating structured data for some of the most popular CMSs like WordPress, for example, they won't be necessarily the ones that will by default support this sort of property.
Of course.
Implementations, right? They will require a little bit of more sophisticated approach or personalized configurations or tools like yours that allow you to create actual even knowledge graphs of like an entity map, right? Within the website, right? So it's not only about enabling a plugin, clicking, saying yes, I want, this is my point, right? But actually understanding what you want to specify, the attributes, the properties, if you're following the guidelines, not only from a technical standpoint, but editorial and a logical that makes sense to your website. And so I would like to highlight that, yes, with there are a lot of possibilities, but it is fundamental to understand the importance of acknowledging how it can go like really well if we understand what we're doing with all of these configurations, or it might not necessarily even have an impact because we say, oh, we have already implemented structured data, but we just installed the most basic or the model of the SEO plugin that does it, and we have just pretty much implemented the most basic option that is not necessarily the one that will give us the type of impact that we want, right?
I think in general, it all boils down to being highly strategic. Structured data is one of these modern SEO technique that has to be used on top of a lot of other layers of SEO. Like, page isn't visible, you don't need structured data, sorry. Pages is not crawlable because it's all JavaScript that doesn't render. I mean, structured data might help as long as it can be rendered. But I mean, if the page is it cannot be rendered, maybe even the structured data cannot be rendered. So first and foremost, we want to get to structured data when we have an healthy site, right? So you don't want to start doing, fancy configuration of structured data if you have something wrong on the lower level of SEO. Sitemap doesn't exist, or sitemap is totally wrong. Don't do structured data. I mean, you can do it, but it's not going to bring the impact. I mean, we have to measure the impact in terms of business results. End of the day, SEO for me is a branch of business marketing. So we have to get back to the client with some sound result that we have created an impact that creates at least 3x the cost of the implementation. Okay. Now, how do we do that? We have to be very strategic, which means, first of all, less is more. So what are the very few property that could change and move the needle for that specific, set of pages? The other item is scale, because of course, as Aleida was mentioning, there are tools. And so we have to understand the tools, because the tools might give us the scale, because the reality is that it's, it's most probable that we can create an impact when we can reach a scale. So if I can cover 60% of your pages with, you know, that additional property, I might have better chances than if I do a crazy super duper job on 3 pages, you know, unless these 3 pages are, you know, moving the entire business, which possibly is unlikely. So understanding the scale means, okay, if I want to have these little change, what is the cost? I mean, is there a plugin that allows me to do that? Well, then that's a good option. In our case, we provide, you know, as Aleida was explaining, like a canvas. It's an open canvas Wordlift. Basically, once you plug, you know, the JavaScript there, and of course, it's a primarily enterprise oriented, but then you can experiment with different type of markup without going back to the client. That's the beauty of some of the implementation. I mean, it's not just Wordlift. There are other tools that allow you to plug in, you know, structured data, and above all, experiment with structured data, because something that might work one day, it might not work the other day, or, you know, there is a continuous evolution of it.
For that, I would like to follow up with the next question, right? That I think that it connects well with what you mentioned before about testing things out. There are more tools nowadays too that allows you to, so for example, I'm thinking of tools like SEO testing that allows you, without necessarily going into a super extremely sophisticated approach, to be able to measure, okay, if you have implemented these sort of changes in this category or this group of pages, do a sort of SEO A/B test with another very similar group with a similar trend over time. So you have your control group and your viral one, and see a little bit of the impact without getting into a massive implementations of millions of URLs all of a sudden, right? Things like that. I'll, as you mentioned, as a strategic approach to verify if going to pay as you expect on one hand. Then on the other hand, the leverage of tools. I want to go there because another of the questions have to do regarding, it is always good to have the support of a developer, yes or no? I mean, of course, like ideally, I would love to always have with me on one hand, on my
ideally no, because they cost too much, you know.
And another one, I would like to always have with me a native English speaker and a native French speaker, a native every native person that in a language that I tend to interact. Like ideally in this work, I would love to have always at my side, like a DevOps, and like, let's be realistic, right? Like certain things for which we really will require development access and resources, because there's no other way that, given the constraints of the platforms that we work, we will be able to do changes. However, if there's an opportunity to leverage existing tools and plugins and extensions that are actually good, and we actually know how to configure them and why, and we effectively follow the relevant steps with the type of outcome that we want, why will we waste? Again, everything here is business. Why will we waste the time and resources of other developers, as you mentioned, Andrea, that cost non-trivial money nowadays, to waste on that you can do very easily with a tool many times if you actually correctly understand how structured data works, and the tool is good and flexible to configure it as you need it, rather than focusing the time of the developer on doing a lot of other stuff that is much more complex, and you really are not able to do, because there's no way for you to be able to have access to that or to change that given the platform, right? So by all means, ideally, I will say, if you really have no idea about the code, do it, because you really don't want to waste your time and the time of your client, or even do something that will end up even wasting everybody's resources. But if you are, and I expect that you do, are willing to give it a go with your own website first to test it out, if you really want to understand and put a little bit of work and use tools, validation tools that we have, SEO crawlers nowadays, by the way, like from Screaming Frog to Cyble has an amazing, really good structured data validation tool, the rich results one from Google, the schema one. So if you want to give it a go to play with the code and stand also on your own website first with the plugins and the tools that already exist, do it first, validate it well, understand it well, go through the guidelines, the technical guidelines, the editorial guidelines and requirements to understand if it is the correct context for you to implement that type of structured data or not. Still today, I see websites wanting to implement the product structured data in listings, product pages still, just because of the ratings, things like that, right? So it's important that you understand the why behind you are doing and how to configure it. And if you do it and have the tool to do it, give it a go. You don't need a developer, right? So Andrea, what would you say are your favorite tools to do this, to implement, validate, and monitor structured data?
Yeah, so I'm kind of old school, so I always, kind of start with the schema.org validator on one side and the Google Rich Result testing tool on the other. I do use Write Chrome extension for having a quick overview of what is available on the page. I do use a lot of different visualization tools to understand, kind of the extent of a graph. I think that before the tool, it's important that we understand the concept that we can talk with the search engine about a page and whatever the page represents. And we have to familiarize with this idea. So there are classes that allow us through the relationship to express meanings and to say things simple like, this is a web page that represents the about of this other company. So we have to work in constructing information for a machine to consume it. So we have to start looking at the content type. What is this? Is this a recipe? Is this the about page? Is this the home page? Is this the product description page? Is this a collection, a list of pages? What is the nature of the page? And then what is the nature of the content represented inside the page? I can have, for example, an article that reference a main entity, a main topic. And so I want to first and foremost understand the content and then understand the language that the search engine will use through structured data to understand the content type and the meaning behind this content. So again, I mean, do I have a product that is targeting a women audience? Well, there is schema audience. This is an attribute. Now, recently, Google has added support for the age for the product. So what is the expected age for this specific product? Now, we might or might not have this information, but what happens if we do have this information? Well, we want to help the search engine understand it. Why? Because it would help the search engine fit the searcher with the page, and therefore strengthen the ability for us to capture a qualified audience. If I have a product that is, targeting elderly people, I want the search engine to know, regardless of the text, that I can use that. Yeah, classic schema, I use it a lot for visualizing the chart, and it's a great way. Actually, I'm kind of not conventional, so sometimes I use also these, and you can just plug in here a JSON LD, and then you can kind of visualize this. This is a kind of a more complex tool that allows you to visualize data in general, but you can use it also for structured data. This is another one that I use a lot also for visualization. And again, why I use this visualization tool is because I want to understand the graph that I'm building behind the page to convey information to the search engine. I'm talking with the search engine, and I want to give it the least amount of information that can move the needle. And so I have to make an exercise. I don't want to overdo it, but I have to do, things that make sense. Now, we know that there is a, continuous change in regards to, what is supported, what is not supported by structured data. Just for example, I mean, just before the end of the year, Google has released 6 new updates on structured data. Now, since the beginning of the years, there are at least 2 major updates on structured data implementation. So vehicle listing, update on the information that we can add to the course for online training, the super important enhancement on the profile page for any person-related information. End of November, Google extended the number of attributes for businesses. Now, this has been pivotal. Why? Because, for example, now we can add business information about an organization. What does this mean? Now, here in Italy, for example, we use VAT, which is a code, a tax code for identifying a business. It wasn't previously supported by Google. Now, since the 29th of November, it's supported by Google. Now, if I add that, and we've been adding it on hundreds of pages, what does it happen? Well, we are helping the search engine reconcile the entity about the organization with other information that it might have collected elsewhere. And therefore, we are enticing the creation of a lot of knowledge graph panel. So we're seeing a lot of knowledge graph panel coming up as we add these additional business detail inside schema organization. These are very tiny little pieces of information. I mean, we're not adding, tons of markup. We're not creating, ultra complex graph. We're just adding, a tax code. And in most cases, this is enough for Google to trigger or create a knowledge graph panel that didn't exist before. This is huge in terms of impact.
Yeah, it's amazing how Google, as you mentioned, has started to support more and more properties. So, for example, they announced a few months to the forum related data because they want to better recognize user generated content.
Yep.
Also, a few months back at a conference the Google itself in Zurich, one of the sessions was about structured data and how they were starting also to support the mix of microdata and
that's been big. That's been big.
Which, by the way, is interesting to think that it hadn't been supported until then, right? Like you can specify structured data using a mix of JSON LD and microdata in case there are restrictions in your platform too. So it's definitely another way. So I completely agree that whenever you're are implementing something, you need to go and check the latest documentation. Not because something was done like 6 months ago, you should assume that is still true. Which takes me to another thing and another topic regarding, and there is a question here regarding doing a little bit of spying or benchmarking on competitors, or how they are implementing structured data and taking that into consideration or not, right? Like with anything SEO, this is applicable here too. You might want to take a look for inspiration a little bit. You do a benchmark as you do a keyword research or backlink analysis. You identify what do they have as a reference, and what are they triggering, are making the most out of all the rich results in Google for the queries that you're both targeting, how they are doing it. Are they validating well or not? Are there more meaningful opportunities just to not necessarily, if you end up doing just what they are doing, by the way, even if it is correctly implemented and what they are doing is correct, let's say, you will be always behind, of course.
Yeah.
What else can you do? What will differentiate? So again, but of course, again, with a grain of salt, how much time do you want to spend doing that rather than doing what is actually strategical and more meaningful for you, right? So again, also thinking that they might have an implementation that is not necessarily correct, and they are getting away with them right now just because Google hasn't yet identified it, and that doesn't mean that it's correct too. So common sense, your own critical thinking, your own goals, your strategy, that can be good as an input and as a reference, and see what is up there for as an opportunity for you to go for. that doesn't, but just because they have it, that doesn't necessarily need means that you should do it too. And also the way that they do it, the plugins or tools that they might use that you might want to identify, or you could identify with different tools like build with, etc. That doesn't mean that you need to do it in that exact way too. There's so many different tools and platforms. And by the way, before leaving you again, Andrea, because you didn't highlight this, I believe, enough. Andrea has one of those tools that can actually help you to implement the more complex structured data. This is not the structured data that will be added by default or as an option, free option in SEO plugins, by the way. I want to leave it there, right?
We publish data along, besides injecting the structured data in the page, we also publish it in off page in a knowledge graph. That's what we've been doing since the early days, and that's what makes our tool different from the competition. Besides the fact that we can apply any markup with Wordlift, but back to the competition. I mean, I shared one of the tools that I like from Alessio, neural text, that allows you to quickly see, what are the different classes implemented behind the query. So that's a fast, easy way to look at, the markup that your competitors might use. But again, as Aleida was saying, it is, I mean, the competition, it is interesting, but it's not always, the case where you want to just do the same or overdo it. I mean, what is interesting, I think, in structured data for me at the end of the day is that I want to be very strategic. I want to add things that move the needle for the search engine. And how do I measure that? It's super important. So I want to, of course, get an evidence that where I have treated the page, I am creating a lift, which is, generating potentially more visits, more leads, more revenues. But I also want to start looking at the nature of the queries that I'm attracting. I give you in the beginning the example of the free shipping, because of course when we apply the free shipping markup, and now for shipping in general, there is a lot of detailed specification that can cost a lot of money for the implementation. Also because in some cases you have to get live data from the merchant, so there are some technical complexity. But what is interesting and beautiful is that when you apply strategic attributes, and these attributes is curated, the data is good, then you can see how it reflects on the queries. And so you can see that you will start to get queries where, the free shipping or the shipping terms start to become visible. And that's where you start, seeing that you have created a dialogue with the search engine, because you are providing information. The search engine is giving you queries that you couldn't see before, because now you're becoming eligible for, specific, I don't know, local queries or specific queries about the shipping terms, or as we discussed before, the recently introduced audience age reference. So this is for elderly people, this is for young kids, this is female, this is male. And then you start to see that the query also transform and change over time as you add these attributes. That's the results that you want to trigger and to initiate.
What would you say are those structured data properties that you will tend to think are useful for most of the websites that you have seen that have the highest impact in most of the scenarios, right? For people to try out?
Well, I mean, right now, for example, given the existing status of the web and the creation of AI content, schema person, it's something that we should keep investing on, because the authority of the content that we write, it goes along with the ability of the search engine to understand who we are, who is the author of the content. And so adding more links and more references about a person, it's definitely creating value these days in the context also of SGE. Right now, I went completely crazy on kind of a remote markup, which is a claim review for fact checking. This is kind of a very sophisticated markup introduced in 2015 by Google, primarily for publisher willing to fact check information. So someone is saying something and I want to fact check it and claim that that is not true or that is totally true, whatever. But I want to kind of give evidence that I fact check an information that is coming from someone else. For example, we can even apply to e-commerce. Someone has written that, you know, this product doesn't work. And I want to fact check and demonstrate that the product instead works. And I can structure these into a claim review markup that is supported by both Google and Bing with the purpose of creating helpful content for the users. So search engine in the last 8 years have been working to collect this information about fact checking in order to create more reliable information ecosystem. This works also, by the way, on images. Sometimes we see these fake images. Well, guess what? We can apply a markup to say, well, this image is fake. You know, if you see an image of a person that you know that it's not real, you can actually write in structured data, well, that piece of content published by that person isn't real. Again, why I'm introducing this? Because we were talking about schema person and authority. So again, we want the search engine to understand the authority of the author. And so we want to kind of provide all these details that would construct, you know, an image of a person, an image of an organization, an authority on a topic.
Amazing, that's right. So I would like to also highlight a couple of ones that should be a must if you work with publications or a blog.
Yeah.
The article structured data, the news, if you're focused more on news related information too. Then of course, if you're an e-commerce, online store, marketplace, product structured data, that I can definitely see will only get more and more important with the treatment that Google is giving to products.
It's huge.
And the layer that they are building, they're becoming pretty much marketplace themselves and competing with
We
Amazon.
can say that. We can say that.
100% with the product carousel and with the SGE tests that they are doing. They are pretty much generating a PLP type of experience directly there and leveraging all that with the product knowledge panel information, providing what the user really needs to convert directly there, right? And go directly just to buy the information and all of the information regarding the reviews, the ratings, the price, the conditions in general, delivery, etc. is pretty much brought, and the information that they are trying to rely on more is structured data and less on the merchant feeds, in fact. And they have pretty much, I think, that consistently say like, yes, we want to rely more. We are supporting more of these features connected to products that we use structured data for. And so, and eventually we want to stop relying on feeds, right? So I think that is a huge opportunity, right?
It is. I mean, that is, of course, in the context of product markup, it's also easy to be measured because, you know, that's a big chunk of the work that we do with large brands worldwide is to look at, you know, what is the perfect product markup? Because the perfect product markup, it actually drives more sales because of the reasons that we explained before. Now, the perfect product markup is also can be expensive for the organization unless they have, you know, an implementation strategy. That's where, you know, Wordlift, I think it's playing its role is like, okay, we get there, we hooked up to the API, we get the data from, you know, their merchant feed, or we get the data directly from the product information management system. And then we can enrich this data and automatically change it on the page without getting back to the development team. I think that's,
I believe that also is understanding that structured data, and at the end of the day, what we do in SEO in general will pretty much serve to augment, let's say, or give more visibility of what you already have product-wise. But if you have a broken product or bad product conditions or bad pricing, etc.
Yeah, of course.
That is not going to help. I'm mentioning this because you made me just when you're going through this, you made me remember a few years back how I was working with another retailer, and they were like, "Oh, but we don't want to show really how much we have on stock because we have far less than our competitor, and our pricing are a little bit
It's
higher.
not so good.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
delivery is this. So, but yeah, again, it's about good user experience and decision
Yeah.
making. And of course, if you have a poor product, poor conditions, it will be much more easy to validate like this, right? So think about that and remember that at the end of the day, yeah, good marketing, even if it is good marketing or good SEO, won't fix won't
No,
fix
I mean,
product.
I think in general with data, it gets even more brutal because you have to state the facts. And so either, you give me the best price or you don't. But, I have to put out a price, that's mandatory. And of course, the same applies to the shipping terms. The same applies to the return policies. It's either good or bad, but I have to write it down because that's my job in facilitating, the information retrieval of the search engine. And your job is, of course, to face the fact that if you're not competitive, you're not gonna get an edge. Reality is that as we start talking about data, we get more transparent as a business, and therefore we face, higher competition. And if we face higher competition, we have to understand, why the consumer has to choose us. Now, here, a big role it's also played by the branding. So in structured data, we can facilitate, for example, as we discussed, the creation of a knowledge graph panel by adding more details. We can facilitate, the logo, the visibility of the brand, of the logo of the brand. And these are elements that do have, tremendous value when the consumer is right there, to make a decision. If I want to buy these from eBay, for example, if I want to buy from the manufacturer itself, some people would not trust eBay. Some people would instead trust eBay. But I mean, we're getting, when we're not dealing with pages, there's no fluffiness. It's raw data. and we get transparent, and then of course we have to face the business and understand, okay, what are the strengths? There's no point for me in kind of giving visibility to, I don't know, shipping terms that are not valuable. But we have to be aware that there are going to be, competitors that might have, valuable shipping terms, and that would be, a complete loss for the business. So this is why also it's important to look at the competitors, is that, if there are, areas of improvement and the business has something valuable to say on a specific area. I mean, as I said, returns is a tremendous value now on SERP. I mean, there is a badge for it, and it facilitates, the decision of a consumer that is looking at, the products in the product knowledge graph panel.
Indeed. To start wrapping up, let's talk a little bit about the potential of all of this with LLMs, Google Search Generative Experience. If at some point they end up releasing it, right? We know that it's on tests. Is the usage of structured data, let's say, consistently aligned on helping them understand better the meaning with our content, and hence we can expect that at some point it could also help a little bit with more visibility in there or not? Have you been testing any of this? We I don't know if you saw, I'm sure that you probably did, that it was a month ago or so, back in December, there was a paper published regarding how some researchers found out that there's a high correlation on adding stats, citations of
The jail paper. Yes.
And I was like, okay, but this pretty much EAT on current SEO and what we all tend to do, right? I don't know if it is a little bit more of the same like that in this case too.
I read a nice blog post by a guy that an SEO that wrote me an email because he saw my comments on Twitter. I mean, in general, I was pretty excited about this jail paper, but this other SEO kind of makes some interesting comments about the methodology that they use. But yeah, long story short, there are tremendous opportunity in plugging data into a generative AI engine. The reason is that in a conversational search, information will move back and forth, and we can see these in SG, we can see these with Perplexity, we can see these with Copilot on Microsoft. Now, adding more details enable the conversation on facts. Now, problem is that, of course, we have to change the way in which we approach the consumer, because we might end up in, seeing very little traffic on the site, and we might see a lot more interaction on SERP. I don't know if you have seen one of the example on the presentation of Gemini, the new language model of Google. In one of the demos, they presented how the application on the SERP can be automatically created by a language model based on the data. And this is exactly what is happening, especially in the area of e-commerce is more visible. I mean, the more we provide data, the more SG is capable of creating an experience around an entity, whether this is a person and there is a, maybe the video of the person, or this is a product. We can immediately see that, more data enables better AI. And this is also, I mean, kind of on the line of what this geo framework that Aleda was introduces talks about. So definitely, we can also see by the amount of updates on structured data guidelines that Google has been releases in the last months, that something is going on. And I know from people working at Google that their investment on the knowledge graph is actually increasing significantly, because language models are also eye-watering expensive. And therefore, in terms of reducing the cost of serving the searcher with results, structuring information and providing into entities, it's way more effective than every time going back to the language model and asking to retrieve a piece of information. So a lot of the data inside the shopping graph for e-commerce, inside the Google Knowledge Graph for other type of entities, is actually coming into the SG experience, also to reduce the cost, but also to improve the user experience.
Makes sense. Makes complete sense. So I hope that this is like the final push for people to do it well, do it in a strategic way that actually makes sense and is ROI positive. Thank you very much for all of the insights, your time, and the tools and ideas beyond the usual ones. I believe that I love the way that you do talk, because it's beyond SEO terminology. It's about data. Is about conversations, about meaning, right? And at the end of the day, if we all thought like that, we will go beyond the typical tactics that don't make sense for what we want. It's just following whatever guide we have read and focus on what is actually meaningful. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
There is one last piece that I want to share today, because this is like something that I always pointed out. Also, when I work on the structured data chapter of the Web Almanac, is that when we build this data, we do it for Google, but we are also doing it for us. Now, this seems so abstract many years ago, but if I look at the work that we've done here at Wordlift in the last 12 months, well, we have trained language model on existing structured data. So the same data that we created for Google in the first place is actually the data that we use for fine-tuning models for our clients. And I can see that this will become also, a predominant trend. So the data that we put on the page, keep in mind, it's not just for Google, it's going to be also for your way of building AI apps. And everyone will build AI apps. Everyone is building AI apps with ChatGPT. So keep in mind that data is important also for you, not just for the search engine.
Love it. Love it. Thank you very much. That is an amazing way to finish our today episode. I really appreciate it. If you have liked today's episode, remember to subscribe to the channel, to follow Andrea, and I hope to see you in the next edition of the Learning SEO Q&A Accelerator. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.